Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. Today we have a special guest right after this.
Justice for you and me. Justice for Mike Brown.
No justice, no peace.
After the death that shook the entire country, I decided to step up as a community activist and create a global podcast, Woke by Accident. Here, I amplify compelling news stories and matters impacting African Americans and their communities. My goal is to give a voice to the voiceless and have the difficult conversations needed to advance relations and matters of race. Tune in to Woke by Accident podcast. I am your host, Jen, and it is streaming on all of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as our website, www.wokebyaccident.net. Thank you for listening and take care. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. I am your host, Jen. Welcome. Today we have a special guest, Sambaza, who is the creator and host of the internationally renowned and award-winning Sambaza podcast. Sambaza was recently a panelist at the 2022 Afros and Audio Podcast Festival on the topic Future of African Podcasting in the Global Market. And I was glad to connect with Sambaza here on the Clubhouse app and also with the Black Podcasters Association and one of my favorite communities, the Content Creators of Color Collective, where we discuss podcasting topics and best practices. Welcome, Stephen Sambaza.
Thank you. I like the intro. That was a very nice intro. And thank you, guys. And I am glad to be on Woke by Accident podcast, finally.
Definitely. Glad to have you here. You're my first guest for 2023. So definitely glad to have you. And tell us about your podcast briefly here, Sambaza Podcast.
Oh, okay. As a host of Sambaza Podcast, what we do is I try to bring in stories that are very interesting to everyone. We'll talk about general topics that involve culture, sports, or anything. I just didn't want to get myself limited. But the caveat to it all is I basically run my show in terms of series where I interview people from the diaspora and our African American population, and then the African diaspora, and then I'll go back to my homeland country, which is Kenya, where I do interview people from Kenya, not only Kenya, but Africa as a whole. The main intent is whatever topics that we're discussing, I'd like to have you at the end of the topics look and say that we're all one and we are part of a community. Whether we're living in a different part of the world, we all have the same values and values and have the same goals. The only thing is just where you're situated in the world.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of your guests are internationally based. Is that right?
True. Yes.
Okay. And you recently took a trip back to Kenya. How was that for you?
It was nice. I did enjoy it. It was a short trip, 1 week trip, but it was very, very relaxing, even though I was doing a lot of stuff. But I did manage to do a podcast, because normally when I go to Kenya, I tend to try to take some time and meet some of the podcasters there and do a podcast with a podcaster. So I did one with Dan Aseda, who actually showed up with me at the Afros and Audio Festival. We did a panel together with him. Yeah. So we did a kind of pre-panel podcast.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, great. So we'll talk more about the podcast in a minute, but Sambaza is going to go over some news stories with us today. So let's get into these stories. This first one is about hashtag Keenan Anderson. You may have seen this hashtag going around in the story about a 31-year-old high school teacher and father who was stopped by the Los Angeles police for help after an accident, and then they cuffed him, pinned him down, and he was repeatedly tased and there's a video going around that you may have seen on social media where he's begging them and pleading them to stop. Unfortunately, this incident occurred on January 3rd, and Keenan did die of the cardiac arrest from the excessive tasing. People have been taken to the streets since this, and people are mad and angry, and it's quite shocking. I sent you the video and the story. What were your feelings on seeing this incident?
At first, I was wow. First of all, I want to thank the LAPD because, for one, they did bring out the video and showed the whole thing happening as it should, and try to be more transparent. I think this kind of helps the people be more receptive to the police, to know that, okay, fine, I'm seeing what had happened in terms of the police body cam, and which is a new technology that is being used. We don't have that in most places, but it gives you the advantage of seeing exactly what the police officer is seeing. To the police officer, there are two things. There's fear, and there's also the part of there's fear for your safety, and there's fear for the other person's safety. I'll want to put it that way, whereby
Right.
when you come to a scene, you don't know what to expect, right? There have been different types of initiatives by police departments throughout, whereby, especially with these cases of where you're coming to arrest somebody and you're not sure of what's going on, sometimes there's the risk of somebody being mentally insecure, right? Or having some mental health illness or something of that sort. Now, this is just my opinion. When I looked at it and watched the video, first of all, it does give you at least a picture of what happened from the beginning. My personal opinion, and this is just me from watching the video, is that at the point at which the police officer showed up, he could have probably done a bit better. But again, I'm not a police officer.
For sure.
He kept on repeatedly saying that somebody's trying to kill me. Please help me. Somebody's trying to kill me. Please help me. To me, I would have, if I was the police officer, I may have been a bit more lenient with regard to it. And when he approached him the second time, actually, when he went to the road the second time, and he was actually trying to tell him, he shouted at him and told him to stay down. That's when I think things escalated. Whereas it could have been still de-escalated to the point where, just talk to him, keep talking to him. Yes, there's traffic. They could have closed the traffic on that area, talk to him, kept on talking to him and tell him, can you kindly move to the side, and then bring the paramedics in, and then kind of now use the paramedics to kind of help him, get calm, maybe, whatever the paramedics do. I don't know. But that in itself, the way they accosted him looked like they were treating him more like he was a criminal. Yes, he was being forceful in nature, but he didn't look like he was in any danger. I didn't see any, weapon, and he was claiming his life was in danger. It wasn't like it was something that he was trying to hurt them. No, he kept on claiming they're going to put something in my car, they're going to kill me. He repeated that so many times. And as a normal person, as a normal person, if I see somebody repeating words time and time again like that, I'd be like, there's something wrong with this person. It's not a normal thing that you would do, and then run in the middle of the street. So it's unfortunate that it had to get to that point. But I wish they would have handled it more differently. Now, based on the fact that it's a Black person and, it was Black male, we're usually strong in nature, and it took a lot to subdue him. And I think at that point, that's when everything went from bad to worse. Then he got tased. Should they have tased him? I don't think they tasing. You already subdued him. Jen, there's something which is usually weird about Black and white folk. Okay, I'm going to be honest here. When Black folk commit the crime, and then when they're being accosted or when they're being taken in, there's usually a struggle, or they're being made to struggle. Whereas with the white folk, when they're caught up, they just stand there and they're calm, and then they're taken in like as if nothing is happening. They don't get tackled or anything like that, even if they're sitting down. It's I've noticed that in whatever I've observed, which is
Okay.
truly, it hurts. Let me say that. And I wish people would look at everything in the same perspective. I know there are cases where yes, force is needed to be, but in this case and scenario, especially when we talk about this particular case, I think it could have been handled much better, in my
Right.
opinion.
Right. I mean, there definitely was a struggle. I feel like the officers have to use, their judgment and training to determine that, what is the best practice to implement here. They are trained in hand-to-hand combat and things like that to, bring a person down where they don't have to, use their firearms and a taser. In this case, a taser was used, not a firearm, but we've seen cases where they go straight to the firearm and, we have
And
a death resulting. But in this case, you're dealing with a person who is not armed. They may have had a concern that he may not have been mentally stable. Like you mentioned, he, made these outbursts and things like that maybe have given the impression that he was not all there mentally, right?
yeah,
So, yeah.
I don't, and also there were people there, and then they said there were community leaders who were standing there ready to help.
Mm.
Would it have been better for them to have jumped in? I think yes, but then again, they're not qualified. When do you get a qualified person to help out? And I don't know if you're asking the police to do too much based on what their jobs are, because remember, they're to serve and to protect. Now, when you try to make them become mental experts, now you're giving them another job description, and then
Right.
how do you train them to unlearn and learn? Because remember, when you get and this is any police officer. Okay, let's talk about just a police officer. When you get to the scene, there are two things. It's either you kill or you get killed. You have to use the weapon to protect you. That's what it's there for, right?
For eliminating
If
a
you get
threat
attacked,
is
yes,
my
eliminating a threat.
understanding.
Yes. Now you don't know whether it's going to be a threat or there's no threat. So at your mind, it could be in a split second. Anything can go wrong. And I think when you're operating from that perspective, I think especially from American cops, like we do have the British cops who don't have guns with them. They walk with regular batons, and that's it. I mean, if they need reinforcements, they'll call the units, and when they call the units, that's trouble right there. You don't want to be there. But
You
before
mentioned
then,
British cops, or is that
right?
from your prior experience out of the country?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I've lived there, and and you look at videos. They don't have guns. Actually, they fight with knives. In British, most people you get knifed rather than get shot at. The chances of being shot
Okay.
at, it's rare, very rare to hear about
Mhm.
guns going off. Um, so I think in our scenario, our cops are also trained to be, focused on it's a gun. There's more the gun violence is there. So
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
killed or be killed. So when you step onto a scene like that, I mean, hey, I would be scared, but
You're right.
um, it shouldn't have been that case. I'll be honest, we shouldn't have gotten to that point. When he ran into the street, that's it. Just let him express his anger. Let him say that he was whatever. But when he started shouting at him, he was even obeying the commands. I mean, like he was going down to the ground, and he was told, okay, he was firm and told him get to the ground. He was going to the ground. Why again do you want to jump on him and try to to forcefully bring him down? He could have talked to him, talked him down and told him, okay, fine, let's go over to the side of the road again, like he did in the first place, you know.
Right. It seems like they were concerned that he was resisting and they wanted to cuff him. And the fact that he was moving, did not allow them to cuff him. but he doesn't have a weapon, so where is he going? You know what I mean? And then you
And
have more
resisting
than
from
one
what?
officer. Well,
Resisting
see,
from what he, you know,
yeah, yeah.
uh, it, there's a bit of an element of resisting from what. Okay, you're resisting from being arrested, but he's telling you he's running away from something else. It's like, if I was running away from something, I'm scared. You would comfort me, right? I haven't paused that
Well,
threat, and
that's
here
not
we
the
are.
police's job. They're not
Yeah,
comforters. They're not comforters.
but that's where you serve and protect. Serve. That's where
Well,
the serve comes in. Then you protect. Protect now. That's when you have to use force if necessary. But yeah, life lost that
yeah,
shouldn't have been, and I think they could do
definitely.
better. Um, Especially with our community, Black people.
Hmm.
I think they should be a way of looking at it. And we have a lot of issues with mental illness. So I
We
think
do.
with the approach has to be, and I'm not saying that it's specifically, I don't want to put ourselves in a box. That's one thing we don't want to put ourselves, and then we'll be classified as all Black men have or Black women have a mental issue. No, it's across the
Hmm.
board. But when you're a police officer, you kind of look at it, there's a possibility of things happening like that. I know Dallas police did have a project. I don't know how far they've gone with it, but it was whenever when you get a call like that, especially when they say somebody is behaving haphazardly, the,
Hmm.
the, the, the cop will come, and then I think they'll have another unit with the ambulance coming in for somebody who's mental illness expert, to be right
Yes.
there with them to kind of see, or a social worker type of thing, to be there to see what's happening. Is it safe? I don't know. Anything can
Well,
go. But these are things that you have to implement them. Run a study for 6 months, see what has
hmm
happened. What are your options, and then from there you come back with a report and say, okay, fine. We've gotten X amount of calls with these people. We went to the social worker or mental illness expert, and out of these, we may have saved maybe X amount of lives. And then now you project and say, is this project going to be well to keep going on, or something that you want to shelve, or do you want to make changes, or how do you upgrade it? Or does it need more funding to, be implemented as part of the project? So
hmm
there are very many ways they could have handled it. It's just that uh, this is one case that, like I said, we shouldn't have gotten where we got to. Somebody shouldn't have lost their
For
life.
true. And there's been a lot of conversations about having a mental health expert available for these types of calls where, from the beginning, it's a mental health or wellness check or something like that has escalated. And the police officers just come in with that force. And sometimes, another method is needed. And we've talked about that. How many cases where family members have called the police for a family member having an episode of some sort, mental episode, and it gets out of hand and the police just come in with the force, and somebody might lose their life because it wasn't de-escalated in the better way, sensitive to the mental health issue at hand. So that's a good point. If they could try something like that, it's probably a funding thing that they don't do these type of practices. But I definitely feel that there was an injustice, with this Keenan
Mm. Yeah.
Anderson situation, um where he shouldn't have died, you know as a result of this call, and him actually asking for help from the police. You know what I mean? You call the police for help and you end up dying. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong with that picture. You know what I mean?
Or even the,
So,
the public. I mean, if the public was called over the issue, I mean, then you
mhm.
you question, do you want to really call the police at that time, when you know that if they come in, a life will be lost? Why would we do that? eh, this is where you draw the line with the public. You try to get the public perception is really very, very important, especially when it comes to cases like those. And when you want to create a safe environment, people will be like, why would I want to go out and talk about, tell the police about what's going on in my community when I can't trust them when they show up. Somebody's going to be dying, or somebody's going to lose a
Well,
life
see, and
where
that's the
it's because of,
thing.
yeah. So that is very, very important, and I think cops should be aware of that. And I don't know, it's one thing, they have to learn and unlearn. You can't just go right into it and just say, hey, we're going to do this. There has to be a process, learning. You bring in, you have to go back to school probably to learn about mental health and how to identify somebody's mental health, and then find
Mhm.
which options to use. Yeah, so I don't know what's become of this, or what do you think is going to become of this, Jen, in your perspective?
Well, I mean, they've talked about, training methods. The George Floyd training didn't get passed. Um, it's, sadly, he mentioned George Floyd in his cries for help and stop, help. You're trying to George Floyd me is, an expression he used. And it's just really sad that that main officer that's just putting that force on him and just repeatedly tasing him, and I ignored that, or just thought that he was so strong that he would flip over somehow and overpower him, even though he's literally pressing his whole body on him. And then he has a taser in his hand. So it's a training issue for sure. The fact that they have, the video out on the LAPD's YouTube page with the multiple views, that's a step in the right direction. I don't know how long it took to get that out for the public, because a lot of times with some of these other matters, it's hard to get the video out there because they're trying to hold it back, and that's a concern for the public, so that we can try to get answers and justice for the family and things like that. So definitely training is one, in an internal transparency to share those videos, as soon as they're available to the public, so that it can be evaluated. An internal investigation needs to happen. It looks like it is, based on the video we saw out there on the LAPD's website, that they are doing an investigation, because yeah, it's a problem. The way that this officer handled this matter definitely is a problem.
Yeah, and it's
So
public perception as well. A
mhm.
public code of opinion also jumps into it when you start looking at that. Now, in case they go to a jury, whereby now, of course, this one will probably be taken by internal affairs. You do
Yeah.
have the issue of, one, is the police officer guilty of what they were trying to do with excessive force? Now, when you're choosing
Mhm.
your jury, how many people have watched this thing on YouTube, and then come to a point of having the perception of what exactly it is that they would deem fit for the officer. Those are the issues that may arise in it. And then also, I think they always have pacts, not pacts, but there's the police union and there's the police itself. So the
Mhm.
union usually defends the police. That's why you have these videos. There must have been something with the public and the police union with the one in Los Angeles that allows you to actually show that video or bring that video out, because I mean today is the 15th and that thing happened. That's almost like 2 weeks. Yeah, it's a bit
Mhm.
fast, especially when there's a death involved. Um,
Yeah.
because sometimes the union may say, okay, fine. They have these issues where they say, okay, fine, we're not going to release this until something has been done, and then you're kind of tied to where people don't see the video. But you see, and this is one thing people don't realize, and I always say, it's not the police department, it's the union, the police union. And I'm not against unions.
Okay.
The police union is the one that is strong enough to hold back on that. See, there's always going to be that constant fight. So they already have their own laws in the union regarding to how things are done, and then you also have to deal with how the officer, the police itself, the police department wants to behave with the community. However, now when those two clash, and then you still have the public. So there are three things that are working here. There's the public, what you expect of the police, and then what the police department expects to be done. And then you have the police union, which is helping the police to make sure that their police are well taken care of, to help out in the public. So there's
Mhm.
always a clash of these three
And
departments that
conflict,
people, there's always a
total
conflict,
conflict. Yeah.
right? And that's what we don't understand. And all the time you keep pointing you keep pointing your fingers to the police department. But if you look carefully, some laws, or not laws, some bylaws that are created by the police union usually help them out, to whereby now you cannot circumvent the things, and then you'll go to court and they'll be able to sue the police department and get something out of it. So it's a tricky situation, and that's why
Very,
you get
very.
all these uh different things happening at different situations. So again, people have to be educated on that. There's a lot of education. And again,
Mhm.
remember when I said, do we have the police officers to be mental experts? Now that
Mhm.
is another job description. I'm just going to say it in terms of me in a union environment. My job description is A. If I'm going to be doing job description A and you introduce job description B, then we have a question there. Hey, are you trying to make me, you're adding me more responsibilities, so you're making me be mental health expert. Now adding that means that you either have to pay me more, or you completely take it out.
But they're not trained for that. So I mean, that's a whole nother skill that they're not, that's
Exactly.
yeah. Right. So it's a lot of different concerns. You mentioned conflict with the union and with the whole DA. That's a conflict too. That's why a lot of times they're asking for an independent investigator to come in, because the police has a relationship with the DA in the town or in the county. And, how can you ask them to, investigate
Police
one of their
themselves.
own? I mean, you see it watching Law and Order. We talk about Law and Order all the time as a reference point, but literally, the DA and the county and the police officer work hand in hand, side by side all the time. So something like this happens, and we're asking to turn the tables and investigate one of their own. It should be someone from the outside, or some. That's why they move into a different county sometimes, so that we can have a level of fairness that needs to be there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Do you think this will come out to be having a fair judgment at the end in this case?
Uh, I mean, it's hard to say, but I feel like enough people are raising the concern when you see that heightened, it's all over social media and, all of the
Mhm.
news story, the morning shows are talking about it. That is, putting pressure on, the, um, the DA's office, so that they have to give a result. They have to put those videos out so that people can evaluate them, and give that family an opportunity to decide if they want to take counsel and pursue a lawsuit or whatever they want to do. Yeah. So we seek truth and justice and fairness. So um, will we get it? We'll see. And there's a practice in place for these matters, but you definitely want to bring that to everybody's attention, since this is a recent topic. Being a father, I mean, you may have concerns, if your children, once they're
Mhm.
driving and out
Yeah.
here on the road dealing with police officers. So we like to have the conversation so that we can think about these things.
Yeah, that is one of the scary things as a parent. When your kids start driving, you're like, okay, what am I going to do? What do I teach them? How
Right. Exactly.
you know I can't have more than three people in a car. That's it, max. If
Yeah.
you have like four kids, then we have a problem, because now there's that idea of, and then if you all of you are of a different color, that's another thing altogether.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a lot to have to take in as an immigrant, and as a black person living in America. It
Right.
Like I said, the police have to have some type of grace, uh, also, when you're going to when you're going there. And like I said, you still have to they still have to teach them something. And um, look forward to. I'm just hoping that it'll make we will have something good come out of this. I don't know how many
Mhm.
cases of this have happened before, because some of these things happen, but they fall into the cracks because people are scared of going to speak, or maybe the person may have had priors before, but that does not, that's still a life lost. So
For sure, definitely.
yeah, maybe they'll probably go back and look at other cases and evaluate them and say, okay, we went wrong here, we should have done this better. And and it's not specifically for the African American person. I want to say, everybody, just be treated fairly.
Mhm.
Let's not have a scenario whereby it's like, hey, I'm a black person, I feel kind of uncomfortable being around a white cop. No, you're a cop. The badge is the badge, not the color. That is
Mhm.
that we're talking about. And I think that's the most important thing we should be looking at.
Yeah, and all the police do not abuse their power. I've had former police officer chief on, and he talked about eliminating the threat and the concern that you, like you said, that you may not make it home. I mean, police officers want to get home to their family just like a normal citizen does, but when there's abuse and things like that going on, it needs to be handled. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
For
Yeah.
sure, but yeah, all police are not bad. There are definitely some upstanding officers that are doing the right thing, and
And it's not
that are
even it's not even the US, it's all over the world. You still
for
have
sure.
dirty cops, you have clean cops. It's all it's humans. It's a human nature.
Yeah, right. Yeah, some people will just take advantage of their authority, their power, and just manipulate things because they're in a certain vantage point. You're just going to see that with all fields. You may have a lawyer that is, taking advantage, or insurance, so these things come up. We definitely don't want to,
you just
put
you
the
just have to have
picture.
those. Yeah, you have to have those you know checks here and there, and that's where internal
Yes,
affairs comes in, and independent inquiries and stuff like that, to make sure
for sure.
things are done right. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. So let's move on to this next story that I want to get your thoughts on. I sent you another video and story about Collier Gwynn, who is a owner of a San Francisco art gallery, and he was filmed hosing down a homeless woman sitting on the street in front of his gallery in the cold. Okay. And there's a video of him just taking his hose out and, you know, hosing her on her face and her head while she's sitting on the ground. And the reports say that she was a black woman.
Yeah, that
So,
just did not sound right. In the Even when you look at the video, it just gave me some chills, because even as he was doing it and he wanted to explain himself, like, okay, I did it because she said it was cold, and I don't know, he didn't. He was just chilling. Then he was just there, like he was watering a flower bed. That's how it looked to
mhm.
me in the beginning. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a human being you're actually hosing. And then, like I said, when you look at the back in the 60s, when you used to
Yes.
have riots, and in the US, they used to use the hoses, and then dogs. That still went. I mean, even South Africa used to do the same thing in the
Hmm.
apartheid era. They used to use whatever, water and dogs. But then here now we're using a hose. Now this is a person, and then it's your why. It hurt me. It hurt real bad. I was
Yeah,
triggered, and
definitely to
you have
degrading
no right.
to do that to
Yeah,
someone. Hmm.
yeah. You have no right to do that. And it was not kids play, where it was somebody who was like, okay, we're playing, and somebody was running away, something like that. No, there was no
Oh
laughter.
no.
He was just
Oh no.
sitting there and just relentlessly hosing the person. And then it like told them to move away from where they were at. So I think when whatever he was trying to justify, that action, there's no going back.
Right. Yeah. Reading all the comments and posts and things, it
Oh
looks like
yeah.
he had a history of this is
Mhm.
homeless the right word, or unhoused person, being out front of his business, which, is, I guess, a nuisance for people, who are proprietors of businesses. But there's a practice in place, call the police or come out and ask them to leave or move or something like that. If you don't want to offer help or assistance, if you just want them to leave the premises, you can do that, or call the police and ask them to come address the matter. But for him to think that the proper response, okay, she's, out front of my business, I want to get her out of here. Let me take out this hose and, flush her with it. For him to think that was the proper response, it's just, disgusting and sad. And, it does take you back to a point in history when, certain white people would, well, the police in a lot of cases during those times would put hoses toward black people, and so yeah, it's just definitely it wasn't a good.
It wasn't a good look, wasn't it?
It wasn't a good look.
I,
It wasn't a good look.
he could have handled it much better. Just talk to the person. If they're having an
Yeah, it
issue,
could have been
call the
handled
police. And
differently,
if the
right?
person
And
has
then
been going
person,
there
he's just.
for a long time, I
Mhm.
think if the
Well, I
person
guess
has been
she's
going there for a
always out
while,
front.
right,
Mhm.
you can talk to them. I mean, they're well aware of what's going on, and if you talk to them and tell them, hey, can you move, my business, stuff like that, um, chances are 8 out of 10 times, I must say, they will move. Um,
Mhm.
with homeless people, I don't know. I'm not an expert of it, but if you kind of talk to them and tell them something, they will abide by what you tell them. They don't have that aggressive nature. Unless you see them being aggressive, then you call the cops. That's what they are there for. But for you to go get a hose and
Right.
start, and again, she wasn't like attacking him. It could have gone worse because he could have been attacked because of the hosing, but he wasn't. So where was the issue here? Why were you having to use that much force? Is it your mind telling you something? Are you reliving a particular era and feeling that since I lived through this era and what I'm seeing, I can actually do that? I mean, what he was left with was whistling. I mean, that was the last part he was left to do. I mean, Jen,
Mhm.
that was, yeah, it was tough to watch. It was really really tough to watch.
Right. And I think this is a good reminder of like how people act when they think no one's watching. Will you, kick somebody while they're down, like literally, kicking someone while they're down. Many of us are only a few paychecks away from being on the street. You know what I mean? And so for someone to do that to you when you're already at a low point in your life, it's pretty disturbing. So I, wanted to talk about this as just a reminder to, treat people right and do the right thing, even if you think nobody's watching, because, sometimes our the man upstairs is watching,
Right.
so you should do the right thing, don't
And we need to
degrade
stay woke,
people.
like you said. You need to
Well,
stay woke and look at. You need to stay woke
you
and look at these
know,
things because at some point something like this could happen while you're walking in the neighborhood. And what are you gonna do? What are you gonna be able? What will you say at that time? Will you start recording? Will you confront the person? Uh,
hmm
you have to get ready for these things to happen. So it could be anything, but
right.
shout out to the person who recorded that and gave us this tidbits to say there's still people, let me say, evil people like that in this world that would do
Yeah.
something like that. So if you can expose them, let them be exposed, and let them get the repercussions, because you learn not to do that, and then somebody else will see it and learn that that's not right. Don't ever think about doing it or even try to do that. I'm hoping that they penalize that person, you know, to its fullest. Whatever it is
Right. I'm
fine
sure
or
it's
something.
impacted his business in some way or another, with his name and picture all over Twitter. And yeah, they, put his business out there, his art gallery, and, to let him know.
Yeah, I have a problem with that usually because when you put something that's bad publicity, good publicity, it's still publicity to me.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
when you put
that's
them out
true.
there and best thing is highlight it for a while, but don't put it too much that they'll gain publicity. At the end of it all, he'll have his sympathizers. They'll be like, "Oh, you're doing too much."
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know, yeah. There's a
Yeah,
there's an
his
upper
website,
limit.
his
You can
website's probably getting more hits than it's ever gotten, because they're like, who is this man?
exactly.
But
Exactly.
yeah,
Now you know the art
definitely.
gallery, and then it sticks in your head. Then next time you talk about an art gallery, you go back and you're like, "Oh, it's that person." And when you tell somebody else, they may not have experienced that, but then they'll be like, "Okay, they still art. I want to see the art. I'm not interested in what that person did." And here we're trying
Mhm.
to cancel the person. So yeah, you can hurt his pocket
Right, definitely.
to a point. Yeah.
It could. It really could. But yeah, I wanted that to be a reminder that, we can all face a low point in our lives and you shouldn't, step on, or throw water on somebody because you think that they're less than you because, who are you to judge and we shouldn't behave in that particular way, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah. And then okay, let's talk about
If it was
podcasting.
a black person doing to another black person that, would it have the same impact?
Um I think that they would put them on blast still because it really could have been someone who was wealthy and had our money and that was a black person and get off in front of my property, move. But I don't know about the hoes though. That
I mean,
just
the
took
same
a
scenario.
turn.
Yeah, you put a black person doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah, would it have the same effect as that? That's quite another angle of looking at it. When you look at these
Hmm.
things, yeah. But even though it's not right, the whole point. Remember, whether it's color, whatever, whether you're black,
Hmm.
Hispanic, whatever, you shouldn't do that. That is degrading a human being. Yeah, we do that to dogs. When you want to clean them in the backyard,
Right.
you just hose them down, or horses, not people. So it wasn't the
Definitely.
right thing. Yeah. So now to the fun stuff, right? This is the part
Okay.
where
Yes. Okay. So
you had
Sabaz
me
is a
triggered last night.
podcaster.
I'll tell you, you had me triggered last
Yeah,
night.
I had
Oh
to
my
bring you in to, dig into some of these hard stories,
God. I
which is not
appreciate it.
normally
It's not normal.
not
No, I'll take the topic, but I don't usually go that deep. But
okay.
I do appreciate the fact that you did bring it in, kind of jog my mind. And, like I said, like by websites, you stay woke. I mean, you can't just assume everybody has good intentions. There's some people there with bad intentions. And
That's true.
yeah,
Right, definitely. So, okay. So there was this story on the podcasting really on everybody in the podcasting games radar that this news story on vulture.com came out. This could be a rough year for the podcast industry. And so it goes into a lot of things about how, based on the trends of podcasting and these big machine podcasts like Joe Rogan and things like that have done so well, and it may not continue going into this year. A lot of the corporations, iHeart and the big media, Spotify, they get a celebrity name, they slap it on there, and they think they've got this hot show, but it's not always working out well. And then they mentioned that it's a different way of looking at this, even with the economy impacting the industry. It could give true podcasters hope, to keep it going and get back to the heart of uh the skill or whatever. So yeah, I want to get your thoughts on it's so many different things they mentioned, but the celebrity names and those big machines kind of stuck out to me on this one.
okay. But we have to, on this topic, when I read it, it was very interesting. Actually, somebody has been talking about it. Is it crack bracken soup? there was a lady who does
Okay.
the lady,
Okay.
she was talking about one of the elements there. Now,
Hmm.
remember, it was all this podcasting took a huge got their breakthrough around the pandemic time, right? So
Yes.
all the stars were available. You had time to listen to these podcasts. And hey, my podcast started around the pandemic because that's when I found time, and I started off at that time. And hey, numbers were good. Everybody was listening to it. They have time. Then there was this rush to create podcasts. And if you go back now, you'll generally find that most of the podcasts that had been started around that time, and even if I look back at the friends that we started podcasting with, when I say friends,
Hmm.
I mean people we started podcasting with, some of them are kind of stopping podcasting.
Oh, they're
It
gone.
has to,
They're
yeah, right.
gone. Yeah, it's
And it
over.
has to evolve.
Yeah.
So when we're evolving, when it evolves with the, now let's talk about numbers. The numbers were huge. Now the numbers are dwindling. Why? Because now people figure out what's their priority. What was your priority then to podcast? I had time. Now it's not about time. It's about commitment. It's about your how you. It's your love for podcasting.
Hmm.
Okay. So what it did is it elevated podcasts. That's why we're talking about podcasting, because without the elevation, people weren't really talking a lot about podcasts, going on back and forth. But now it's mainstream. Okay.
It is.
That part being said, that a lot of people came in with podcasts. Then you had revenues coming in, right? Most of the people who are putting in revenue, companies that are putting in revenue, will putting revenue onto these star athletes and stars that were out there, movie stars. You
Mm.
get in somebody coming into your show. You had this wonderful podcast that would kind of uh, have so many views, and you put money in there. Well, now things are changing, budgets are changing, so there's a loss. uh, Maybe the star power is not there anymore, and then people have just stopped listening to the show, and then you have to change your budgets. Now, when there was podcasting, obviously, when there was a pandemic at that time, obviously money was kind of, you could find money here and there, so most of the companies found some money here, put their budgets into podcasts and advertise through podcasting. Well, after a while, there's no interest. Remember, also people who are doing Patreon,
Mhm.
um, you are giving people surplus of bonus episodes and stuff like that. Like I was saying in the
Right.
beginning when we're talking, there's that talk that we have before and after. You may add that onto the podcast and call it Podcast Extra and put it as a Patreon.
Mm.
Well,
Hmm.
after a while, maybe people are like, you know what? I subscribe to it. I don't need it.
Okay.
Those are going to fall off. So your revenues are going to fall off. So it has its impact on that. So podcasting is taking is kind of taking a look at itself and seeing what is the next step after the pandemic. Where are we going to?
Yes.
Before, we had no visibility. Everybody talked about a podcast. Yeah, okay, there's a podcast going on. Okay, here's a podcast here and there. But people generally didn't realize what a podcast is. Now people know what a podcast is. And then
Mhm.
now we're taking a step back and saying, okay, what are we going to do with this podcast? How are we going to regulate this podcast? How are we going to do in terms of numbers? How are we going to create new listenership and stuff like that? So it is a great article. I really liked it. For me, I'm happy that podcasting got its visibility. Some of us who love to podcast, just we're still going to be podcasting. Just go ahead and podcast. One thing I'm for with the podcasting is, you're learning. If you
Right.
stick through the whole process and go through the whole process, after a while you become proficient in doing some things, and then some things you let go. What you may have thought was important back then when you started is not going to be important when you're at year 3, 4, or 5. So that's what the article was primarily talking about. Where are we in podcasting. Is podcasting going to
Mhm.
die? Nah. Joe Rogan
Mhm.
is going to be there. He's going to probably leave. There's somebody else who's going to come in. Um, somebody else is going to find something to
True.
make podcasting better. Or it may not even be making it better. It may give it a different angle, you know. Um, but what I'm looking at it is there's more education in the podcast, and a lot of people discovering a podcast means that there's some stories, and this is where we come in as African podcasters. There's some stories of ours that we need to put out there, and even African Americans, there's some stories that we need to put out there. Uh, Without podcasting, we will not be able to do that, because remember, the podcast sticks in the airwaves somewhere, and you can
Right.
go back and listen back and forth, and stays through generations, and you still have a recording that you keep somewhere, that you can put out at any time. So
True.
with that being said, yes, it is it's reincarnating our stories to be told, and there's some other interesting stories that are out there that you can listen to. I know there's some which are, how do I say, there's everyday storytelling, and then there's that
Okay.
stories that which will be there for the long run. So either way, it's still going to outlast itself. So podcasting is here to stay.
Oh, definitely. As an independent podcaster, you observe all of it, from your reality celebrity podcasts, which, a lot of these big machines we talked about have just, slid right into, ride the trends and things like that. And we'll see if they'll stick around. Some of them will. The Joe Rogans aren't going anywhere, like you said, or he may bring in someone to, take over the reins when he's just tired of making all that big money he's making over there, which I don't think he's tired of making that money. And I think he enjoys it. We're not even going to get into his content, but just from an overall standpoint of what he's doing, he is successful. He is making, big coins at what he's doing. But for the rest of us, we had to reinvent the wheel and get creative. Even some of the ones like I paid into Patreon for some of my just favorite podcasts, and I kind of pulled back a little bit after pandemic is not, we're still in a pandemic, but it's the offices are opening back up, people are going back in the office. Like you said, their time availability is different now, and so people have been, like, the podcasters have been opening themselves up, going on the road, you know what I mean, having these live podcast experience. Is not just your celebrity ones, even independent podcasters are doing live shows. I've seen charging tickets. They're making that, they finding a way to make that bread, you know what I mean, which is interesting. Hey, you can't knock the hustle. I mean, you're being creative and things like that. So,
and I think also the ones who, if you were dependent, like if you changed and were more dependent on podcasting as your primary source of income, now you have to, with changing budgets, you have to now start figuring out how to be more creative. And that's when you bring out the live shows, going around with, and you make some money here and there, and it's great. What does that do? It does increase options for us indie podcasters. I'll say indie because, I'm still broke. I'm trying to make some
look,
change on the
okay. Independent.
So, right. So with us who are independent and haven't started making so much revenue out of it, we're going forward with what we can do. Like, hey, you remember now, you see there's TikTok, there's Instagram and Facebook Reels. Depending on how creative you are, you could use those channels to also generate income and also push or create yourself visibility to push people to come to listen to your audio or video podcast. You make short clips and then send them over to the main part, and what do you call trailers? You make your trailers there. So a lot has been going on. I've been doing that for my podcast. I would go to TikTok. I create some TikTok videos, and with those TikTok
Okay.
videos, tell people, "Hey, this is Sambaza with Sambaza podcast. You want to listen more? Go ahead to Sambaza podcast." So I'll be on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. So they're all combined, and yeah, that's how you create yourself some visibility with your audience and keep them engaged. The most part is
Mhm.
just keep them engaged, keep them engaged. If the more I see you, the more I'm in tune to what you're saying. And then also have reminders. Sometimes you have some shows that you put out maybe 6 months ago or a year ago or maybe year one. Remind the people,
Mhm.
hey, I did this show this time. Maybe you want to check it out and listen to it. So you can have like 3, 4, 5 topics and keep recycling them. But people don't realize that you're recycling them unless the diehard ones will be like, okay, we've listened to this show, but you could find someone who's new who might be watching your show
Exactly.
120, whereas they don't know what your number 2 show was. So
Oh,
yeah.
definitely. Definitely can repurpose content. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a great idea. We talked about your podcast and how you take it all over the globe, from Kenya. When did you come to the States?
20 years ago.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a 20 plus person. And actually,
Okay.
I've been thinking about doing a podcast with people who have been here for 20 years. Um, it's a nice, like I get a 20-year person and a 10-year person and do a show with them. Now, what I'm doing is my show is usually created on series. I'll have a 4-part series or a 3-part series. Mostly it's 4-part series or 5-part series,
Mm-hmm.
and would have the topic. That's how I'm able to mingle around and bring in different people to talk about stuff. And with this, you have different views regarding the topics. I have tried to do freestyle where I have different people just coming to the show. I know I tried that once and I was like, what am I doing? It wasn't feeling right. So I have to find a topic and then put in people. I also started this new project that I interview podcasters. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a podcaster come onto the show, and this is on YouTube. And also, I'll have an audio which I'll throw in, just to throw off the monotony onto my podcast. Sometimes when I'm not when I'm working on a lot of the projects, because usually I have like 2, 3 projects working at the same time, because I call people and then I do the show, edit it, and then put it together, and then I'll say, okay, who comes first, who comes later, and then have the thing put out there. So it's really interesting when doing that. So yeah, hopefully one time I'll do the 20
Okay.
plus series with people coming in here for 20 years plus, how they feel in their journey.
Okay. Are you seeking other international friends that
Have been 20 plus years. Yeah, I should
to
have.
cover or to speak with on your show?
Yeah, I will have, definitely. If I'm going to do a 20, so this is where I'll try to
Okay, I
get.
might have somebody for you.
Cool, cool, cool. Now that's another
Okay.
topic I got, like, ooh. And then, I'm still working on the topic for sneakerheads, which I should
Yeah.
start editing it soon, next month. Oh, but we haven't even talked about the color content, the creative, is it creators of con- color? Okay, I call it C4, the C4 Collective. Okay, you
Yes.
say it very well. That was a learning process, you see, and this is what I actually tell. Okay, this is the thing that I'm going to tell up and coming podcasters. Whenever you
Mhm.
are doing podcasting, start with what you want to maintain your baseline of what people are going to be used to your podcast, right? If it's a niche that you want to stick to that niche, and also while in that niche, experiment. It's a podcast. You can do anything you want to do. It's yours.
Mhm.
It's your baby. You want them to wear jeans today, that's fine. You want them to wear pants, slacks, that's fine. You can do that.
Right.
So play around. after a while, just like musicians, you know, you start off at one end, you play around with these different genres, and you decide, okay, fine, I've tried all these genres, and I'm going to stick to this one. It suits me best. Usher has done it. That's a good example, and you should do the same. And that's when the C4 challenge helped me realize that, hey, you know what, there's something good I can do out there that's different. And I enjoyed my 30 days of podcasting, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. And you
Good.
know, if it's twice a year, hey, why not? Have fun with it. And that's what's going to keep you in your podcast. Otherwise, too much of one thing, you might get bored. I mean, it's not everyone who gets bored, but I personally say I'll get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, and then take breaks too. I do take breaks. I've taken
Do
a break
you?
now for a while. I think I've taken a month break. I haven't
Oh
posted anything.
wow.
Yeah. So
Okay. I'm not a fan of breaks, but I mean, I
yeah,
like a week here and that's about it. But yeah, I try not to go longer than that.
yeah. Well, s- other things come into play, and then Christmas period
Yeah.
comes in, and then I was also experimenting. That's the time that when I took the break, I was actually working on the TikTok. I was trying to learn how to do the TikTok and Instagram and create reels and stuff like that. So now that I'm there, now I'm back, I'm like, okay, this is the beginning of the year. I can start off and get myself, since I know how it goes on that side, now I can get myself going and doing stuff. So it's going to be an interesting year for my podcast this year. Hopefully, I can get
Great.
everything to work here.
And tell us where we can find that podcast. Samantha.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Um, wow. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you should be able to find Sambaza. Just do a search on Sambaza. If you're missing it, do a hashtag Sambaza podcast. I'm on Instagram too. Instagram, Facebook as Sambaza podcast, and Twitter. So if you're interested, you can always get me there or email me, sambazapodcast@gmail.com. That's where I reside.
Okay, awesome. We'll have the links posted
Oh, thank
in the
you.
chat for everybody. And he made reference to the Content Creators of Color Collective, which we have a community on Clubhouse. So if you guys are on Clubhouse, you can tap in with the community there. And we may put something in the show notes about that as well. Anything else to share, Sambaza?
I'm wondering, why didn't we put this on Clubhouse? We should have done this thing on Clubhouse and have some replays so people can listen to it and go
That's
from
an
there.
idea. That's a thought. But I wanted to be on my platform. But yeah, I mean we could,
It's
pop
another
up on
platform,
Clubhouse.
right?
Sure,
And
sure. Sure.
one thing is that I like us is the fact that we're also on Clubhouse, which creates a different avenue for talking. That's where we met actually, and we go from there, developing friendships, and this is what it's all about. Clubhouse, because you have to talk here and there about different topics, and you get together, plan out your day, like the C4 group that we have. You just come in, sit, talk, whatever is the topic for the day. And that's how I ended up starting off our topic for the, what do you call it, the sneakerhead, the one that I'm working on, the sneakerhead series. So anything goes. You just get in there, we have a talk, and who knows, we
For
exchange
sure.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to get your feet wet if you're thinking about podcasts or maybe interested in it and don't want to, or you're kind of shy to set up all of the things. Tap in with some of the audio apps such as Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces. There's some audio rooms on LinkedIn even. So yeah, and you
Have you
can
done those?
have some. Yeah, I've listened to a few and spoke with
No,
people.
the Twitter, the Twitter spaces. Have you done those?
I haven't conducted a room, but I've participated in some.
Yeah, I do
So it's
have. I
pretty
have
neat
participated. Yeah.
because Afros and Audio is moving there. Um, they haven't had a whole lot of them yet, but yeah. So I'll have to make sure I remind you or ping you and share that because a couple of them are coming up. So
Oh, I
awesome.
appreciate that. Let me know, and then if I can get in, we'll get in and have a conversation. And hey, guys, Woke by Accident podcast is a great podcast. I really am happy. I've listened to your episodes, and I've really enjoyed them. So, to anyone who's listening, I'd like to tell you, hey, you want to be educated, this is the podcast to be on. And Jen is a great host, and I've really enjoyed myself today.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you for making yourself available for me. I know our schedules are crazy, but you made time and I appreciate it. You're welcome here anytime. And I definitely appreciate your friendship in podcasting. So, yeah, it's been great. And hopefully we can, meet in person at one of these conferences or festivals or something like
This
that.
year, Maryland.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna really try.
No. We're not talking about try. We're gonna be there.
Okay. Are you gonna go? Okay.
No, definitely. I've already booked my time. All I need to know is where the location they're gonna be at, so that I can find the hotel. I can book the hotel and then kind of figure my way out. Tickets, not a problem because I usually book my stuff early. So once I know everything is there, I'll go ahead and do the booking because I know the dates. I just need to know the location.
Yeah, I'm trying to get in on the coupon price. Look, I need a coupon.
We're gonna have to meet and kind of hang out at that place. As many as we can. I think Maryland, because also for me, if I'm going to be in Maryland, so I have to get in on Friday because there's also another podcast, a Kenyan podcast that I'm supposed to come in and do a podcast with them live. So, it's going to be beneficial for me to knock two things at the same time.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you to Sambaza, and guys, check out his podcast. So I'll have it listed in the show notes. So please check out the Sambaza podcast and tap in with the international brother. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you.